My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. The fluorescent lights in the office bathroom buzzed overhead like angry insects, and I was crouched on the cold tile floor between the sink and the wall, my back pressed against porcelain, my shirt soaked through with sweat. This was not happening. This could not be happening. Not here, not now, not in the middle of the workday at Park and Calloway Publishing, where 30 colleagues sat on the other side of that door and where my boss was expecting the Whitfield manuscript edits on his desk by 3 o'clock. But my body didn't care about deadlines. My body had decided, with zero warning and absolutely no regard for my carefully managed suppressant schedule, that today was the day everything would fall apart. The first wave hit me during the morning editorial meeting. A flush of heat crawling up my neck, a sudden sharpness in my sense of smell that made my coworker Diana's perfume feel like a physical assault. I'd excused myself, thinking maybe I was getting sick. Maybe it was just the flu. Maybe if I splashed cold water on my face and took some ibuprofen, everything would be fine. It was not fine. By the time I made it to the bathroom, my temperature had spiked so high that touching my own forehead felt like pressing my palm against a stove. My scent, normally faint and carefully suppressed, was blooming out of me in waves of honeysuckle and warm rain, and I couldn't stop it. My suppressants had failed. 4 months before my scheduled cycle, no warning signs, no gradual build, just a full emergency heat slamming into me like a freight train in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I locked the bathroom door with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling and sank to the floor. My vision was already going soft at the edges, that dangerous haze creeping in that meant I had maybe an hour before rational thought became a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed help. I needed someone. But who? My emergency contact list was pathetically short. My parents were in San Diego. My friend Marcus was in meetings all day. I had no mate, no partner, no one whose job it was to come get me when biology decided to ruin my life. Except, my phone screen blurred as I pulled up the app. The interface was simple, a pale blue background with a single chat thread that had become the most important part of my day over the past 4 months. His username was just the letter K. No profile picture, no designation listed. That was the whole point of the app. A space where people talked without the weight of what they were. No alphas performing dominance, no omegas being fetishized. Just words and honesty, and the kind of late-night conversations that had slowly, terrifyingly, started to feel like falling in love. Kay didn't know I was an omega. I didn't know what he was. We'd agreed on that boundary early, and I'd clung to it like a lifeline because it meant that when he told me I was brilliant, when he sent me poetry at midnight, when he said he looked forward to my messages more than anything else in his day, it was because of me. Not because of my scent or my designation or whatever biological response my body could trigger. Just me. But right now, biological reality was winning, and Kay was the only person in my life I trusted enough to be this vulnerable with. My fingers moved across the screen, clumsy and desperate. Kay, I need help. I know we said no personal details, but something is wrong. I'm at work and I can't leave on my own. I'm scared. The response came in 11 seconds. I know because I counted every one of them. Where are you? Send me your exact location. I'm coming right now. I typed the address of the building, floor 6, Park and Calloway Publishing, men's bathroom at the end of the east corridor. I sent it all because I was too far gone to worry about privacy anymore. Too far gone to care that I was shattering every boundary we'd built. Stay where you are. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me. I will be there in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. He was 15 minutes away. That meant he was in Seattle. That meant we'd been in the same city this entire time. That meant every night I'd lain in bed reading his messages and wondering who he was. He'd been somewhere close, breathing the same rain-soaked air. Another wave hit, and I curled in on myself, pressing my forehead to the cool tile. My scent was getting stronger. Even through the locked door, anyone with a functioning nose would be able to smell me soon. An unmated omega in full heat in an office building was a disaster waiting to happen. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Voices. Someone tried the bathroom door handle and found it locked. "Hello? Is someone in there? Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. If I opened my mouth, what came out would be a sound no colleague should ever hear from me. The footsteps retreated. More voices, louder now, urgent. I caught fragments. "Someone's in there. Can you smell that? Should we call someone?" Then, exactly 14 minutes after I'd sent the message, the entire floor went quiet. Not gradually quiet. Not conversation tapering off quiet. Silent. Like someone had pulled the plug on every sound in the building. The kind of silence that only happens when something so powerful walks into a space that every instinct in every person present tells them to hold still and pay attention. Footsteps. Not hurried, not hesitant, measured, deliberate. The footsteps of someone who had never once in his life needed to rush because the world rearranged itself around him. "Where is he?" The voice was deep and calm, but underneath that calm was something molten, something barely contained, the kind of authority that didn't ask, it informed. "Sir, this floor is restricted. You can't just... I need to see him. Now." More silence. Then footsteps approaching the bathroom door. A knock. Not aggressive, firm, but careful. "Jin? It's Kay. Open the door." Jin. The name I'd given him. My middle name, the one nobody used, the one I'd chosen because it was mine alone to give. I reached up and turned the lock with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. The door swung open. And standing there, filling the doorway with a presence that made every nerve in my body light up like a circuit board, was a man I recognized. Not from our conversations, not from any mutual connection. I recognized him because everyone in Seattle recognized him. Everyone on the West Coast recognized him. His face had been on the cover of Forbes twice, on Bloomberg Weekly, on the front page of every business section in the country. Kale Hayashi, CEO of Hayashi Global Industries, head of the Hayashi family. The man the financial press called the Alpha King, because in a city full of powerful alphas, he stood above them all like a mountain above foothills. And his scent, cedar and winter rain and something electric that I felt in my teeth, crashed into me so hard my vision went white. The last thing I processed before the heat haze swallowed me whole was his face. Not angry, not disgusted, not predatory. Terrified. Terrified for me. Hey, welcome to Moonlit Episodes. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really encourages my work and helps me bring you more stories. Also, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I read every comment. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. To understand how I ended up on a bathroom floor being rescued by the most powerful alpha on the West Coast, I need to go back 4 months to a rainy Thursday in January, when I downloaded an app I never should have trusted and started a conversation that would rewrite my entire life. My name is Sojin Park. I was 26, Korean American, a junior editor at a mid-tier publishing house, and the kind of omega who had learned the hard way that trusting alphas was a mistake best made only once. That lesson had come courtesy of Troy Brennan. 2 years of my life poured into a man who started charming and ended controlling. Troy was the kind of alpha who didn't need to raise his voice to make you feel small. He did it with looks, with sighs, with the slow, systematic dismantling of every friendship, every hobby, every part of my identity that existed outside of him. By the time I finally left, I was a hollowed-out version of myself. No friends, no savings, no confidence, just a tiny apartment in Capitol Hill, a job I'd clawed my way into, and a bone-deep certainty that I would never let another alpha close enough to hurt me again. The suppressants helped. Medical-grade prescription strength, the kind that flattened my scent to almost nothing and pushed my heat cycles into neat quarterly windows I could plan around. I took them religiously, never missed a dose, never let my biology have a single inch of ground it hadn't earned. I was in control. I was safe. I was also, if I was being honest, desperately lonely. That's where the app came in. Marcus, my one remaining friend from college, had mentioned it over drinks. A designation-blind chat platform. No photos, no profiles, no biological information, just conversation. You got matched based on personality assessments and communication style, and everything else was up to you. It's not a dating app, Marcus had insisted. It's more like a pen pal thing, for people who want connection without all the designation politics. I downloaded it that night, slightly tipsy and feeling sorry for myself, and filled out the personality assessment with the kind of reckless honesty that only comes after 2 glasses of wine on an empty stomach. The next morning, I had a match. Username, K. His first message was simple. They matched us because apparently we both answered the question about favorite type of weather with the kind that makes you want to stay inside and read. I think the algorithm might be onto something. I'd smiled. Actually smiled, which was rare for me in those days, and I'd typed back, I hope you have good taste in books, because if you say something like 50 Shades, this conversation is over before it starts. His response came fast. I was going to say Murakami, but now I'm curious what you'd have done if I'd actually said 50 Shades. Uninstalled the app and thrown my phone into the Puget Sound. Dramatic. I like it. That was how it started. Light, funny, easy. We talked about books first, then music, then films, then the kind of deep, sprawling conversations that lasted until 2 a.m. and left me lying in bed staring at the ceiling, heart racing, wondering who this person was and how they understood me so completely. Kay was sharp, witty in a way that felt effortless but clearly wasn't. He noticed things, remembered things, the offhand comment I made about loving the smell of old bookstores, the throwaway line about missing my grandmother's cooking. He'd reference them later, days or weeks after, weaving my own words back to me in ways that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. We established boundaries early. No real names. I gave him Jin. He gave me K. No photos. No designation reveals. No personal details specific enough to identify either of us in the real world. It was supposed to keep things safe, contained, manageable. It did none of those things. By the 2nd month, I was checking the app before I checked my email. By the 3rd month, I was saving his messages and rereading them on bad days. By the 4th month, I was lying awake at night trying to convince myself that what I felt wasn't love, because you couldn't love someone you'd never met, someone whose face you'd never seen, someone whose scent you'd never caught. But I did. I loved him. I loved his words, his mind, the way he asked me how I was doing and actually waited for the real answer. I loved the way he talked about loneliness, not with self-pity, but with a quiet acknowledgement that felt like sharing a secret. I loved the late-night messages where his guard came down and he told me things I suspected he'd never told anyone else. Sometimes I feel like I'm performing a version of myself that everyone needs, and the real person underneath is someone nobody has ever actually met. I'd read that message 6 times before responding. Maybe you just haven't met the right audience yet. Maybe I have, and I'm too scared to show them the real performance. That was the night I realized I was in serious trouble. Not the fun, butterflies in your stomach kind of trouble. The kind where your heart was so far out ahead of your brain that catching up was no longer an option. The closest we came to breaking our rules was on a rainy Tuesday at the end of March. I'd had a terrible day. My boss had torn apart an edit I'd spent a week on, a manuscript I'd championed that he called sentimental and commercially unviable. I'd sat at my desk, absorbing the criticism with a blank face, nodded, said I understood, and then gone home and felt the familiar sinking sensation of being told, again, that my instincts were wrong. That my taste, my judgment, the things I thought were valuable, weren't. I'd messaged Kay without thinking, the way you reach for someone in the dark. That day, I'm starting to think maybe I'm not good enough for this job. Maybe I'm not good enough for anything that actually matters. His response had come quickly. Tell me what happened. So I had. All of it. The manuscript, the criticism, the sinking feeling that maybe my boss was right, and I'd been fooling myself into believing I had something to contribute. Kay's next message was long. He told me about a deal he'd lost early in his career, one he'd believed in completely, one that everyone around him said was doomed. They were right that it failed, he wrote, but they were wrong that believing in it was a mistake. The failure taught me more than any success ever did, and the instinct that told me it was worth trying, that instinct has been right 100 times since. Then he added, your boss doesn't see what you see. That's his limitation, not yours. Don't let someone else's blindness convince you that you can't see. I'd read that message 3 times. Then I'd cried, quietly, alone in my apartment, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being understood by someone who'd never seen my face. I wish I could meet you, I'd typed before I could stop myself. I wish I could hear you say that out loud. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times before his response came. I wish that too. More than you know. But I'm afraid. Afraid of what? That reality won't match this. That knowing who I am will change how you see me. That the version of me you've built in your head is better than whatever I actually am. Or maybe, I'd written back, my fingers trembling, the real you is better than anything I could imagine. You have more faith in me than I deserve. Isn't that what this is? Faith? He hadn't responded for almost an hour. When he finally did, it was just 4 words. Yes, I think it is. We never spoke about meeting again after that. The unspoken agreement remained. This was enough. This had to be enough. Until it wasn't. And then my suppressants failed. When I came back to consciousness, I was not in the office bathroom. I was in a bed, an enormous bed with sheets so soft they felt like warm water against my skin. The room was dim. Curtains drawn, the only light coming from a small lamp on a nightstand. The air smelled clean, filtered, with a faint trace of cedar that made something deep in my chest hum with recognition. I was wearing clothes that weren't mine, soft cotton pants and a t-shirt that was far too large for me, the fabric carrying a scent that my brain immediately cataloged as safe, as home, as mine. My omega instincts, still heightened from the heat, purred at that scent like a cat pressing into a warm hand. Then memory crashed in. The bathroom, the messages, the door opening, Kale Hayashi's face. I sat up so fast the room spun. Easy. The voice came from across the room. My eyes found him in the dim light. Kale was sitting in an armchair by the window, still in the suit he'd been wearing at the office, though his jacket was draped over the back of the chair and his sleeves were rolled to his elbows. He looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually immaculate hair was disordered, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "You've been asleep for about 9 hours," he said quietly. "The worst of the heat passed while you were unconscious. I had a doctor come. She confirmed your suppressants failed, probably a manufacturing defect in the batch. She left emergency doses that should stabilize you." I stared at him. My brain was trying to reconcile two entirely separate people. Kay, the person who sent me poetry at midnight and told me I deserved to be happy. And Kale Hayashi, the Alpha King, the man whose business decisions moved markets and whose name alone made other alphas step aside. "You're Kay," I said. My voice sounded like gravel. "And you're Jin." Something complicated moved across his face. "Sojin Park, junior editor. Favorite weather is the kind that makes you want to stay inside and read." "You knew who I was?" "No." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Not until I walked into that building and your scent hit me. I had no idea. The app doesn't share information. That was the whole point." "But you came, in 15 minutes, to a random address." "You said you were scared." He said it like it was obvious, like the most powerful alpha in the city dropping everything to run to a stranger's location was just what you did when someone you cared about was frightened. Was I supposed to say, "Hold on, let me check my schedule"? The absurdity of the situation hit me, and I almost laughed. Almost. But then the full weight of what had happened settled on my chest. "Everyone at my office saw you." "Yes." "Everyone at my office knows you carried an Omega out of the building." "I didn't carry you." A pause. "Well, not out of the building, only from the bathroom to the elevator. You were unconscious by then." "Oh, God." "Your colleague Diana was very helpful. She gathered your things and promised to handle your boss. I left my card in case there are any problems." "You left your card." Kale Hayashi left his business card with my coworker. "Would you have preferred I left you on the bathroom floor?" I pressed my palms against my eyes. "Where am I?" "My apartment, downtown, 23rd floor." He must have seen something in my expression because he added quickly, "You're in the guest suite. I haven't entered since I brought you here. The doctor is a female beta. She handled everything. Your privacy was maintained." The care in that statement, the deliberate, meticulous attention to making sure I felt safe, that was Kay. That was the man I'd been falling in love with. The fact that he also happened to command a financial empire worth billions was just a detail. A massive, world-altering detail, but still. "I need to go home," I whispered. "You can. The car will take you whenever you're ready. But your heat cycle isn't fully stabilized yet, and the doctor recommended at least 24 hours before traveling, even across the city." He stood slowly, giving me space. "I'll be in my office down the hall. There's food in the kitchen. The door locks from the inside. You're completely safe here, Sojin." He said my name carefully, like he was testing its weight, learning the shape of something he'd only known the shadow of until now. "Kale," I said, and his eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Thank you for coming." "Always," he said softly. And then he left, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. I stayed, Not just for the 24 hours the doctor recommended. I stayed for 3 days because every time I worked up the courage to leave, Kale would say something so thoughtful, so perfectly attuned to what I needed, that my resolve melted like ice on warm pavement. He was nothing like I expected a man of his power to be. The public Kale Hayashi was cold, controlled, a man whose face in photographs never showed anything softer than focused determination. But in his apartment, in the spaces between his work calls and security briefings, he was someone else entirely. He cooked. Not well, by his own admission, but with a genuine enthusiasm that made watching him in the kitchen endlessly entertaining. He made kimchi jjigae on the second night because I'd mentioned my grandmother's recipe in a conversation months ago, and when I tasted it and told him it needed more gochugaru, he grabbed a pen and wrote that down on the back of a napkin like it was critical intelligence. "I don't understand how you remember everything I've ever told you," I said, watching him adjust the seasoning. "I remember everything you've told me because everything you tell me matters." He said it without looking up from the stove, matter of fact, like he was noting the time rather than making my heart stutter. We talked. Hours and hours of talking. The same kind of conversations we'd had through the app, but richer now, layered with the physical reality of each other. I learned that his hands were always slightly cold, and that he rubbed his left thumb across his right palm when he was thinking hard. I learned that his voice dropped half a register when he was tired, and that his laugh, when it came, was sudden and genuine and transformative. He learned things about me, too. Not through the app's careful anonymity, but through proximity. He noticed I flinched at sudden movements and never commented on it, just started moving more deliberately in my presence. He noticed I ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd spent too long not knowing when the next meal was coming. He noticed the faded scar on my wrist where Troy had grabbed me hard enough to bruise bone, and the way his jaw tightened when he saw it told me he understood exactly what it meant. On the second evening, something small happened that shouldn't have mattered, but did. We were reading on opposite ends of his enormous couch, a comfortable silence between us, when I laughed out loud at something in the novel I'd borrowed from his shelf. Kale looked up immediately, and the expression on his face stopped me mid-breath. He was staring at me like he'd just heard a sound he'd been straining to catch for years. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing." He looked back down at his book. "I just realized I've never heard you laugh before. 4 months of conversation and I never knew what it sounded like. Is it terrible?" "It's the best sound I've ever heard." He said it simply, without performance, and then went back to reading like he hadn't just cracked something open inside my chest. Later that night, I woke up from a nightmare. The kind I hadn't had in months. The kind where Troy's hands were on me and I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything except endure. I woke gasping, disoriented, and for a terrifying second, didn't know where I was. Then I smelled cedar, winter rain, and my body remembered before my brain did. Safe. I was safe. I heard a soft knock on the guest room door. "Sajin? I heard you. Are you all right?" He'd heard me through the wall. From wherever he'd been sleeping, or more likely not sleeping, he'd heard my distress and come immediately. "I'm fine," I whispered, my voice betraying the lie. A pause, then, "Can I come in?" "Yes." He opened the door but didn't enter. Just stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, waiting for permission to come closer. Even at 2 a.m, even with my scent still carrying traces of heat cycle distress that must have been pulling at every alpha instinct he possessed, he waited. "Bad dream," I said. "I know." He leaned against the doorframe. "Would it help if I stayed? I can sit in the chair. I won't come any closer." I should have said no, should have maintained the boundaries that kept me safe. Instead, I said, "The chair is fine." He sat down in the armchair across the room, pulled a throw blanket over his lap, and within minutes, his quiet, steady presence had done what no amount of self-talk or breathing exercises had managed. My heart rate slowed. My hands stopped shaking. The nightmare's grip loosened and fell away. "Kale? Were you already awake?" "I haven't slept well since you've been here." "Because of my scent?" "I'm sorry. The residual heat pheromones must be affecting your—" "No, not that." He was quiet for a moment. "Because I keep wanting to check on you. Make sure you're still here. That this is real." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Just let the silence hold us both until sleep pulled me under again. When I woke the next morning, Kale was still in the chair, his head tilted to one side, a book open across his chest, fast asleep. And I thought, this is the most powerful alpha on the West Coast, and he spent the night in an uncomfortable chair because I had a bad dream. Something inside me that had been locked for 2 years quietly clicked open. On the third day, I told him about Troy. Not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. We were sitting on his balcony, the Seattle skyline glittering below us, rain misting against the glass barrier. I told him about the 2 years, the isolation, the way Troy had made me feel like the air I breathed was borrowed and could be revoked at any time. I told him about leaving, about the tiny apartment, about the suppressants and the careful, controlled life I'd built to make sure no alpha ever had that kind of power over me again. Kale listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence between us felt like a held breath. "I want to find him," he said quietly, not angrily, not with the performative rage that alphas sometimes displayed when omegas shared their pain. Just a calm, certain statement of intent. "No." "So, Jean, I didn't tell you so you could fix it. I told you because I wanted you to understand why this," I gestured between us, "terrifies me. Because I'm an alpha. Because you're the alpha, the most powerful one I've ever met. And every instinct I've spent 2 years building tells me that getting close to someone like you is the most dangerous thing I could do." He turned to face me fully. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them look like dark water. "What do your other instincts say?" "That you're the safest person I've ever known." My voice broke slightly on the word safest. "And that scares me even more." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand. His fingers were cold, as always, and mine were warm, and the contact sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with temperature. "I will never rush you," he said. "I will never push past a boundary you set, and I will never, ever use what I am to make you feel less than what you are." "What am I?" "Everything." He squeezed my hand gently. "You're everything, Jin." I should have pulled away, should have reminded myself of all the reasons this couldn't work. Instead, I squeezed back. I went home the next morning. Kale's driver took me in a car with tinted windows, and I spent the ride staring at my phone, rereading 4 months of messages with new eyes. Every word Kay had written, I now heard in Kale's voice. Every late-night confession, every vulnerable admission, every joke that had made me laugh into my pillow at 2 a.m, it all belonged to the same man. My apartment felt small after 3 days in his penthouse, not because of the luxury, though that was undeniable, but because of the absence. His scent was already fading from my clothes, and I caught myself pressing my face into the borrowed t-shirt I'd accidentally packed, breathing in cedar and winter rain like an addict chasing a fix. We kept talking, not through the app anymore, but through texts and calls that lasted hours. Kale would call at midnight after finishing some international conference call, his voice tired and rough, and ask me what I was reading. I'd describe the manuscript I was editing, some debut novelist's attempt at magical realism, and he'd ask questions that proved he was actually paying attention, not just waiting for his turn to speak. 2 weeks after the heat incident, he took me to dinner. Not a restaurant, he cooked again, this time a full kaiseki-style meal that he'd clearly spent the entire afternoon preparing. When I walked in and saw the spread, 7 courses arranged with architectural precision on handmade ceramic plates, I stopped in the doorway. "You made all of this?" My grandmother was a chef in Kyoto before she came to the States. He adjusted a small dish of pickled vegetables with the focus of a surgeon. She taught me that feeding someone properly is the most honest form of respect. That dinner was when I fell completely. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like stepping off a ledge I'd been inching toward for months. He sat across from me and explained each course with the same quiet intensity he brought to everything, and I watched his hands move as he spoke, and I thought, this is it. This is the person. This is what I've been so afraid of finding, because now that I have it, losing it would destroy me. After dinner, we stood in his kitchen washing dishes side by side. Domestic. Simple. The kind of moment that doesn't make it into love stories because it's too ordinary, too real. But it was in that ordinary moment, my hands in soapy water and his shoulder touching mine, that I turned to him and said, "I want you to kiss me." He went very still. "Are you sure?" "Kale, I need to hear you say it." "I'm sure." He dried his hands slowly, deliberately, then turned to face me. One hand came up to rest against the side of my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. The touch was feather light, as if he was giving me every possible second to change my mind. I didn't change my mind. When his lips met mine, it was gentle, so gentle it ached. Not the claiming, demanding kiss I'd braced for, not the alpha assertion of ownership I'd learned to expect. Just warmth and care and a tenderness that made tears sting behind my closed eyes. His other hand settled on my hip, steadying me without pulling me closer, letting me set the pace, letting me decide how much of myself to give. I gave him everything, kissed him back with every terrified, hopeful, desperate piece of my heart, and felt his breath catch against my mouth in a way that told me this impossible, powerful man was just as overwhelmed as I was. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he said. "I loved you before I knew your face, and now that I know it, I love you more. I love you in a way that has nothing to do with designation and everything to do with who you are." "I love you too." The words came out steady. Sure. Maybe the first truly sure thing I'd said in years. The next 2 months were the happiest of my life. I kept my apartment but spent most nights at Kale's penthouse, where we fell into a rhythm that felt less like a new relationship and more like a life. Mornings were coffee on the balcony, my head against his shoulder, his arm around my waist. Evenings were cooking together, reading together, existing in each other's space with the kind of comfort that usually takes years to build. Kale was fiercely private about our relationship, not because he was ashamed, he made that clear early and often, but because his world was dangerous, and the less attention I attracted, the safer I'd be. I understood that. I even appreciated it, given how much I valued my own privacy. But secrets have a way of becoming unsustainable. Wow, you've made it this far. If you're enjoying the story and still haven't subscribed, please take a second to do so. It means a lot. Also, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from. Alright, let's get back to the story. The first crack appeared at a charity gala Kale had been unable to avoid. A black tie event for children's literacy, hosted by one of Hayashi Global's partner foundations. He'd asked me to come, not as a public partner, but as a guest at his table. We'd be careful, he said. No one would know. I wore a suit he'd had tailored for me. Navy blue, perfect fit. The kind of clothing I'd never been able to afford on my own. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. Not because of the suit, but because of the expression I was wearing. Hope. Genuine, unguarded hope. The gala was beautiful in the way that events attended by obscenely wealthy people tend to be. Crystal chandeliers, champagne that cost more per glass than my weekly grocery budget, conversations conducted in careful, modulated tones about investments and philanthropy and summer homes. Kale moved through it all like water through a riverbed. Natural, unstoppable, wearing the mask of the Alpha King with such practiced ease that if I hadn't known the man underneath, I'd have believed it was real. He introduced me to people as a friend, a colleague in publishing, a guest. Each time the word friend left his mouth, I felt a small, sharp sting, even though I'd agreed to this, even though I understood why. Then Troy walked in. I saw him before he saw me. He was at the bar, talking to someone in finance, his hand wrapped around a tumbler of whiskey with the casual possessiveness he brought to everything he touched. He looked the same, tall, handsome, the kind of alpha whose charm worked like a dimmer switch, bright enough to dazzle, dark enough to trap. My entire body went cold. Not the cold of fear exactly, but the cold of a wound reopening, of scar tissue tearing along old lines. Sojin? Kale's voice was in my ear, quiet, concerned. He'd noticed the change in me instantly. What is it? I need to leave. My voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking through my mouth. What's wrong? His hand found the small of my back, steadying me. Talk to me. That man at the bar. The tall one with the dark hair. I couldn't look away from Troy, like a deer caught in headlights, every escape instinct firing but my body refusing to move. That's him. That's Troy. The shift in Kale's energy was immediate and absolute. His pheromones changed, not dramatically, not enough for anyone across the room to notice, but I was close enough to feel it. The warm cedar scent I loved hardened into something glacial, something that made the alpha part of my brain scream warning and the omega part whisper protection. Okay, he said, and his voice was calm in the way that a controlled demolition is calm, precise, intentional. We're leaving. He guided me toward the exit, his hand never leaving my back. We were 10 feet from the door when Troy looked up from his drink and his eyes found me. Sojin? Troy's voice carried that familiar tone, surprised, pleased, proprietary, like seeing an old possession he'd misplaced. Is that you? I couldn't speak. 2 years of therapy, 2 years of rebuilding, 2 years of convincing myself I was strong enough to exist in the world without hiding, and one sound of his voice turned me back into the person I'd been on the day I left him. Small, afraid, invisible. Walk away, Kale said. He wasn't speaking to me. He was speaking to Troy, and the words were polite in their construction, but absolutely lethal in their delivery. Troy blinked. He looked at Kale, recognition dawning slowly. The confusion on his face would have been almost funny under different circumstances. I'm sorry, do I know you? I was just saying hello to an old friend. He is not your friend, Kale said, and I'm telling you once. Walk away. The alpha command in those words was so controlled, so precisely calibrated, that it didn't hit the room. It hit only Troy, like a beam of light focused through a lens. Troy's face went pale. His body actually swayed, every instinct responding to a dominance so far above his own that resistance wasn't just futile, it was biologically impossible. Troy stepped back, set down his drink, looked at me one more time with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. Then he turned and walked toward the far side of the room without another word. Kale got me to the car, got me home, sat with me on the couch while I trembled, his arms around me, his scent wrapping me in a cocoon of cedar and rain and safety. "I'm sorry," I whispered into his chest. "I froze. I just froze." "You survived." His hand stroked my hair slowly. "That's not freezing. That's your body protecting itself. Don't apologize for that." "He knows I'm in Seattle now. He saw me with you." "Good." The word was quiet and certain. Let him know. Let him understand exactly who stands between him and you. Let that keep him awake at night. I pulled back to look at him. "Kale, I don't want you to do anything. I don't want violence. I don't want revenge. I just want to move forward." "Then that's what we'll do." He cupped my face in his hands, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. "But understand this. If he comes near you again, there won't be a polite conversation. There won't be a warning. There will just be consequences that he'll spend the rest of his life regretting." The tenderness in his touch and the steel in his voice existed simultaneously, and I realized this was who Kale was. Not one or the other, both. Always both. "I love you," I said. "I love you more." He pressed his lips to my forehead. "And I will never let anyone hurt you again." Everything fractured 2 weeks later. Troy, apparently, had not been content to walk away quietly. Within days of the gala, a gossip blog ran a blind item about a tech titan seen leaving a charity event with an unidentified Omega whose sources say has a colorful past. The language was coded but pointed, and it didn't take a genius to connect the dots. 3 days after that, a longer piece appeared. This one had my name, my workplace, details about my relationship with Troy reframed to make him the victim and me the opportunist. "Former Omega companion of prominent Alpha, now linked to billionaire CEO," the headline read, and the comment section was a cesspool of exactly the kind of cruelty you'd expect. I found out about the article from Diana at work. She showed me with sympathy in her eyes and rage in her voice, and I sat at my desk reading it on my phone while my world tilted sideways. Troy had done this. I was certain of it. The details were too specific, too carefully chosen to make me look like someone who traded on his designation to climb social ladders. This was his revenge for being humiliated at the gala, delivered with the same meticulous cruelty he'd brought to our relationship. Kale called me within the hour. His voice was controlled, which meant he was furious. "I've seen it. My legal team is already on it. We'll have it taken down by tomorrow." "And then what? Another article? More anonymous sources? This isn't going away, Kale." Silence on the line. Then, very quietly, "Come home." Home. He'd never called it that before. Not our home, not his home, just home. Like it was assumed, like it was the only word that made sense. I went, and when I walked through the door, Kale was waiting in the entryway, still in his suit from whatever meeting he'd abandoned to be here. He pulled me into his arms, and I let him hold me, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. "I think we should go public," he said against my hair. I stiffened. "What?" "Hiding you was supposed to protect you. It's doing the opposite. It's making you look like a secret, like something I'm ashamed of. And I'm not ashamed. I have never been ashamed." "Kale, you're bored. Your family. The business implications alone. I don't care." "You have to care. You're the CEO of a company worth, I don't even know what, billions. 92 billion in current market valuation." He pulled back to look at me. "And not 1 cent of it matters more than you." That's romantic and completely irrational. Perhaps. But I've made a career out of irrational decisions that other people called impossible. Let me make one more. The press conference was held 2 days later. Kale stood behind a podium in the Hayashi Global Headquarters lobby, surrounded by reporters and cameras and the kind of controlled chaos that would have made me physically ill if I'd been in the room. I watched from his office upstairs on a screen, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. He was magnificent. Not because of what he said, though every word was measured and devastating, but because of how he said it. Without apology, without defensiveness, with the absolute conviction of a man who had made his decision and would watch the world rearrange itself around it. "Sojin Park is my partner," he said, his voice carrying across the room with the kind of authority that silenced conversations 3 rooms away. "He is the person I love. He is the person I intend to spend my life with. Any publication that prints defamatory or invasive material about him will face the full weight of Hayashi Global's legal resources. Any individual who contributed information to the recent articles will be identified and held accountable." He paused, letting the silence build. "I became CEO of this company at 26. I've closed deals that experts called impossible. I've outperformed every projection and exceeded every expectation this market has placed on me. And the man standing beside me, who is braver and stronger and more extraordinary than anyone in this room will ever understand. He is not a scandal. He is not a story. He is the reason I am standing here today, and I will protect him with every resource at my disposal." The questions came in a flood. Kale answered some, deflected others, shut down the invasive ones with a single look that made seasoned journalists shrink in their chairs. By the time he came upstairs, I was crying. Not sad tears. The other kind. The kind that come when you've spent your entire life believing you didn't deserve this, and someone shows you, in front of the entire world, that you do. He walked through the door, and I crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed him so hard we both stumbled backward into his desk. "That was excessive," I said against his mouth. "That was accurate." "Your stock might drop." "It won't." "Your board might revolt." "They won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'm Kale Hayashi." He said it without arrogance, just fact. And anyone who wants to challenge my personal choices is welcome to try running this company without me. He was right. The stock didn't drop. If anything, the humanizing element of the press conference generated positive coverage that offset the gossip entirely. The articles about my past were retracted within 72 hours after Kale's legal team demonstrated that Troy Brennan was the anonymous source, and that the information had been obtained through a pattern of stalking that constituted criminal harassment. Troy was arrested the following week. Kale never told me the details of how the evidence was gathered, and I never asked. The weeks after the press conference were strange. The world knew about us now, which meant the world had opinions about us now. Some were kind. An Omega rights organization sent me a letter saying my story had given hope to people in abusive situations. A publishing industry newsletter ran a piece about how my editorial work had quietly shaped 3 bestsellers in the past year, a fact I'd never thought to publicize and that made me cry in the break room. Some opinions were less kind. Anonymous commenters who had never met me felt entitled to dissect my life, my worth, my right to exist beside someone like Kale. I learned to stop reading the comments. It took longer than it should have. Through all of it, Kale was steady, not performatively supportive, not smothering, just present. When I had a bad day, he made me dinner and asked me to tell him about the manuscripts I was working on. When I had a good day, he celebrated by opening a bottle of wine and listening to me talk about paragraph structure with the same attention he gave billion-dollar mergers. When a particularly vicious article made me question everything, he sat with me on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. and held my hand until I could breathe again. "I don't understand how you're so calm about all of this," I said one night. We were in bed, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing absent patterns along my arm. "I'm not calm," he admitted. "I'm furious approximately 70% of the time. But you don't need my anger right now. You need my steadiness. So that's what I'll give you." "What happens with the other 30%? "I channel it into making sure no one ever has the opportunity to hurt you again." His hand stilled on my arm. "Is that terrifying?" "A little, but also the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." The bar was that low? "You have no idea." He laughed softly against my hair, and I fell asleep listening to the sound, thinking that this was what safety actually felt like. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of someone who stood between you and the things that could harm you, not because you were weak, but because you mattered to them that much. Life after the press conference was different. Not easier exactly, but lighter. I could exist in Kale's world openly, without the constant weight of secrecy. His board members, the ones who mattered, acknowledged me with the careful respect of people who understood that opposing the CEO's partner was a career-ending decision. His family was another matter entirely. His mother, a formidable woman named Sakura, who ran the Hayashi Foundation with iron precision, had requested a meeting. "She's going to hate me," I said, straightening my tie for the 4th time in the mirror. "She's going to adore you." Kale adjusted my collar with practiced hands. "She's been asking when I'd bring someone home for 12 years. If anything, she'll be so relieved she might cry." "Your mother does not seem like a woman who cries." "She cried at a commercial for dog food once. My father recorded it as evidence." I stared at him. "You're making that up." "I absolutely am not." Sakura Hayashi did not cry when she met me, but she did something that surprised me more. She took both of my hands in hers, looked at me with the same intense, searching gaze her son had, and said, "Thank you for making him human again." I didn't know what to say to that. Kale, standing behind me, said nothing either. But when I glanced back at him, his eyes were bright. His father, Ren, was quieter but equally welcoming. He asked me about publishing, about books I'd edited, about what I was working on. He listened to my answers with genuine interest, and when dinner was over, he pulled me aside and said, "My son was disappearing into his work. We watched it happen and couldn't reach him. Whatever you've done, whatever you are to him, don't stop." Walking out of that dinner, Kale took my hand in the elevator. Not possessively, gently, like holding something precious that he was afraid of dropping. "I told you," he said. "You told me. Are you ready?" "For what?" "For all of it. This life, my family, the chaos that comes with being mine." I squeezed his hand. "I've been ready since you walked into that bathroom and found me on the floor." "That was the worst day of my life," he said quietly. "And the best. Both can be true. With us, they usually are." 6 months later, on a Sunday morning in October, I woke in our bed to autumn light filtering through the curtains. Kale was already awake, propped against the headboard, reading something on his tablet. When he felt me stir, he set it aside immediately, his attention shifting to me with the focused intensity that still, after all this time, made my heart skip. "Good morning," he said. "Morning." I stretched, feeling his arm slide around my waist. "What time is it?" "Early. You don't have to be anywhere." "Neither do you?" I cleared my schedule. I raised an eyebrow. The CEO of a $92 billion company cleared his schedule on a random Sunday? "It's not random." He reached toward the nightstand and picked up a small box I hadn't noticed before. Dark blue velvet, the kind that held exactly one thing. My breath stopped. "I had a speech prepared," he said, turning the box in his hands. 3 drafts. Very eloquent, very impressive. My chief of staff helped with the second one. "Kale." But the truth is simpler than any speech. He opened the box. Inside, on a bed of white silk, sat a ring. Platinum, clean lined, with a single stone that caught the morning light and scattered it across the sheets like tiny stars. "I was alone before you," he said. "Not physically. I was surrounded by people every hour of every day. But inside, where it mattered, I was completely alone. And then you fell asleep on a bathroom floor during the worst moment of your life, and you trusted me to come find you. You trusted me before you even knew who I was. And that trust, Sojin, that blind, beautiful, terrifying trust, was the first real thing anyone had ever given me." My eyes were already burning. He continued, "I want to be the person you call when everything falls apart. I want to be the voice on the other end of the line that says, 'I'm coming.' I want to cook you terrible kimchi jjigae and watch you pretend it's good. I want every morning to start exactly like this, with you in my arms, safe and loved and mine." He took a breath. "Will you marry me?" The word came out before he finished the question. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, because of course it did. Because Kale Hayashi did not do anything without precision, without care, without being absolutely certain of the outcome. Then he kissed me, slow and deep, and I tasted salt and realized we were both crying. We were married 3 months later. Small ceremony, his parents' garden, January frost on the ground, and heaters warming the air between rows of wooden chairs. I wore a suit that Kale's mother had helped me choose, navy and fitted, and nothing like anything I'd ever owned before. Kale wore black because he was incapable of wearing anything else, and when I walked toward him through the winter garden, his expression broke open in a way that made every person present catch their breath. Marcus was my best man. He cried before I did, which I appreciated because it gave me permission. We wrote our own vows. Mine were short. "You answered when I called. That's everything." His were longer, because Kale had never said 3 words when 12 would do. But the ones that stayed with me, the ones I still hear when I close my eyes, were these. "I spent my whole life being what the world needed me to be. You were the first person who ever asked me to be what I wanted to be instead." 1 year after the wedding. 1 year of mornings in our kitchen, evenings on our balcony, nights wrapped around each other in the bed that had become the safest place in my world. I stood at the window of our home, watching rain streak down the glass, my hand resting on my stomach, trying to find the words for what I needed to say. The pregnancy had been confirmed 3 days ago. Early. So early the doctor had cautioned me about getting too attached to the numbers, about waiting for the next appointment to be sure. But I was sure. My body knew before any test could confirm it. The same way my body had known on a train 4 months before we met, that Kale Hayashi was someone worth trusting. He came home that evening carrying groceries, because despite having a personal chef available at the push of a button, Kale Hayashi insisted on cooking dinner himself at least 3 times a week. Tonight it was supposed to be japchae. He'd been perfecting his technique for weeks, determined to match the version my mother made when I was small, the one I'd described to him in a late-night message months before we ever met. "I have something to tell you," I said, as he set the bags on the counter. He looked up, reading my face the way he always did, instantly and completely. "What is it?" I took his hand and placed it on my stomach, watched understanding dawn in his eyes, watched the Alpha King, the man markets feared and governments consulted, go absolutely still. "Are you—" he started. "Yes." The sound he made wasn't a word. It was something deeper than language, something that came from the most primal, fundamental part of him. He pulled me against him so carefully, so tenderly, like I'd suddenly become the most fragile and precious thing in his universe. "I never thought," he whispered, his voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. "I never thought I'd have this. You have this." I pressed my face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat hammering beneath my cheek. "You have everything." He held me for a long time, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other pressed flat against my stomach. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet, and his smile was the most genuine thing I'd ever seen on his face. "I need to call my mother," he said, and then immediately, "No, not yet. I want this to be just ours for a little while. Just us." "Just us," I agreed. We stood in the kitchen, the groceries unpacked and forgotten on the counter, japchae plans abandoned, holding each other while the rain fell and the city hummed outside. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here, a downloaded app and a matched algorithm. Anonymous messages that became midnight confessions. A suppressant failure that should have been the worst day of my life, but instead became the door through which everything good walked in. I thought about the bathroom floor, the cold tile against my burning skin, the terror and the shame, and the absolute certainty that I was alone. And then the sound of his footsteps, measured, deliberate, unstoppable. The voice that said my name like it was something precious. The scent of cedar and winter rain that my body recognized before my mind could catch up. I thought about all the moments since, the kaiseki dinner and the first kiss over dirty dishes, the nightmare and the armchair, the gala and the confrontation, the press conference and the ring and the winter garden where we'd promised each other forever. None of it was supposed to happen. An Omega with a broken past and an Alpha King with an empire. We existed in different galaxies. The odds against us were astronomical, the kind of numbers that would make any rational person walk away. But love isn't rational. It's the most irrational force in the universe. It's a stranger falling asleep on your shoulder on a crowded train. It's typing, "I'm scared," to someone you've never met, and trusting them with the most vulnerable version of yourself. It's opening a locked door because the person on the other side said your name, and knowing, somehow knowing, that everything was about to change. Outside, the rain continued to fall on a city that saw Kale Hayashi as untouchable, unknowable, the Alpha King on his throne of glass and steel. But I knew the truth. I knew the man who cooked me dinner and sent me poetry and stood guard outside a bathroom door because a stranger asked for help. I knew the man who loved me before he knew my face and fought for me after the whole world knew my name. I knew every complicated, contradictory, extraordinary piece of him. And standing there in the warmth of our home, listening to the rain, feeling the first faint flutter of new life between us, I understood something I'd spent years afraid to believe. I was never invisible. I was just waiting for the right person to see me. And when he did, when he really did, he saw everything. And he stayed. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time.